What's up, guys? Eric here from MajorLeagueTrading.com. And we kind of did it. So the idea in which we had from last night's video, one of the ideas was a quick pop over this 506.50s and then a failure today, that could take us lower here, crack those 502.92s. And then we made our way down here into the next target at 499.48. And there's still one just a couple of points away here for the S&Ps, which is going to come in right down here at, if this would load, that'd be great, 5037.75s. There we go. We can see that there. So I do think that level ultimately gets tested here. And I mean, a pretty crazy day overall, right? I mean, there's a couple things in which stand out to me that I think are super important that we should kind of look for or look at and review from today's action to kind of ultimately see what what took place there. And then also, I have a theory maybe going into the end of the week and what I think tomorrow and potentially Friday bring, which for me is kind of in a way, I don't want to see this happen, but I think it becomes a possibility that we should be aware of, be thinking of. And the reason being is because it might not make for the best trades, right? So now, again, we could get some massive gap to the upside, take out a red bar or two, and then we're back to the races, for longs to the end of the week, and the thing I'm about to say doesn't even matter. But I think it ultimately does. And so what I'm saying by that now is, like, we've had big moves on Monday, small move on Tuesday, fairly big move today that was somewhat kind of trappy. I think there was some potential to catch it, and we'll kind of talk through a couple other names, or one name in particular I was watching for this. So don't be surprised if Thursday and Friday are not going to be the best trades of the week here yet to come, right? So with that being said, I do think we get this move down into 5037.75s. Something in which I was ultimately watching for today was one, just that move we were just talking about, and then a big thing here that ultimately took place. A couple of things that stand out was, number one, we had this 17,857 quarter level in place here for the NASDAQ, and something again, we were just a couple of points away up here from kind of running up and tagging yesterday's highs there. A couple of things in which stand out to me just on today's action and ultimately what took place was, if we pull over the divergence here, there was a divergence here first thing this morning, right? You can see right through this time frame, S&Ps ended up popping about 20 minutes into the day here, made this new high. At the same time, the NASDAQ was not. So we had the S&Ps, we had the Russell, and we had the Dow all kind of pushing higher here for the first 20 minutes of the day. And that was not taking place here in the NASDAQ. So with that, one of the things in which I talked about here, this is Eric's Brain Dump channel. One of the things in which I talked about here was just that NASDAQ right here, this is 945, is the weaker market on the day, right? At the same time, like we just showed you, we got S&Ps pushing, we got Dow pushing, we got Russell pushing, all those things. I'm thinking we might see that quick pop here in S&Ps to get those highs, and then we'll probably fade that. That was the thing in which I was looking for there. I think that's going to be the key today. If NASDAQ gets no strength, then we could just stay in that range, meaning from a long perspective, right? But then again, right down here at 856, I said, okay, cool. NASDAQ, I'm waiting to see this 857 test. From there, right, we can make a valid argument. Does it hold? Does it break under? And then something I said down here is, going to going to take my scalp and call it done. But as long as we continue to reject 857 quarters, then overnight lows are on the table, which you can see we ultimately ended up testing it once, twice, and clearly got those overnight lows as well there. And we completed what was that daily 1, 2, 3 in which we were talking about from yesterday. So the NASDAQ did ultimately do the thing in which we were expecting or thinking that it would do here, is this daily 1, 2, 3. So all of that played out perfectly. I ended up leaving the desk right over in through here, just before 10:30 there. So I ended up not catching the rest of this move to the downside, unfortunately. But one of the other things I want to touch on here is, like, okay, cool. We see NASDAQ didn't get, yesterday's highs here, right? We didn't spike up here and tag those highs like what we were thinking we would on the S&P, the SPY, the NASDAQ. But in the Russell, if charts would load, thank you, we did. So we did manage to rally up and take out those highs from yesterday here in the Russell. And then we managed to do the same thing in the Dow. Once that loads, you can see that there. Just barely, right? We just barely popped up right over top these highs here and then ultimately got rejected. So two of the markets did ultimately do what it is we kind of thought they would do. And then the other two, not so much, right? So that leads me into thinking, one, we had that NASDAQ being weaker on the day. Oops. And then two was the name in which I was looking at, right? So NVIDIA had a level at 869.88 here. If we hold, it's a potential long, but a failure under it, and we have room. Meaning like, hey, this level of 869.88 should ultimately try and hold us on the day. But if it doesn't, right, and we can pair this with, and I say pair, meaning like P-A-I-R, with the weakness we're seeing out of the NASDAQ here, and the overall patterns in which we have across the board in NVIDIA, this thing ultimately has plenty of room to the downside, right? That's why it's in all caps there, right? Now, if we do hold, here's the levels to the upside, right? Those are the targets going to be to the upside here. But yeah, this one, I think this is, at the moment, and it's really tough to say this, I think this is one of the weaker names on the board. And I might completely regret saying that here in another couple of days. But ultimately, I think there's room here down into like 800, I was going to say $1, $801. So another like 40 some odd points to go here to the downside in NVIDIA. So this one's going to be as a top watch here for tomorrow for lower prices. Also, it leads me into thinking the potential for that move to 800 is on the table. Because when we look at this now from an SPY and then an SPX perspective, we're getting really close down here to this kind of $500 number. We ultimately traded it today. And at the same time, we're getting really close to this 5,000 level for the SPX. So with OPEX coming up in 2 days, with the fact that we have the potential for some of these things, SPY, SPX, and all of those, to maybe see some sort of pin in and around that area, we're seeing the Russell and the Dow being a little bit stronger than we did the Russell, or sorry, the Dow and the Russell were stronger than the S&Ps and the NASDAQ on the day. I think ultimately what we'll start to see is either tomorrow or into Friday, we'll see a little bit more of a balance with some of those names coming back together, meaning what I think ultimately tomorrow might bring is a potential gap down, maybe under 5,000 here for the SPX. And then that can try and go lower and fail. And then we kind of balance back out up into Friday, end of day Thursday into Friday, and ultimately settle somewhere in and around, you know, this given area here of about 5,000, roughly the lows from today in the SPX. And I think we see something very similar to that out of the Russell and the Dow and the NASDAQ, right? So Russell and Dow may get a little bit more strength here into tomorrow if we gap down than the S&Ps and NASDAQ, and then they might kind of fall back a bit on Friday while maybe the SPX or SPY and NASDAQ come up a bit. So I think they're going to see a little bit of a balancing game kind of come into play with that today. Because when you think about it, NASDAQ's down 1.20% on the day, and the Dow is only down 0.18% on the day. So there's a 1% difference in how they were ultimately trading against one another today. So those couple of things are leading me to think that. So I'm already starting to be a little bit more kind of reserved for what Thursday and Friday might bring, lowering my expectations on that just a little bit here, and recognizing that there's some FOMO and things to deal with from this week, you know, given Monday's action, Tuesday's action, and then now a pretty decent sized move today. And the completion of what was probably the best looking thing on the board, right, was that daily 1, 2, 3 to the downside here out of the NASDAQ. So a lot of things in this video. Keep all of those in mind, I guess, with you as we go out through the rest of this week. I will catch you guys on the next video. Take care, and I hope it helps. Peace.